Research Methods. Be talking a little bit today about Chapter 5 of the APA Manual, displaying results. Now, this is about graphic displays in a manuscript. So some general guidelines for displaying results, which we'll typically do with tables and figures. First of all, you need to consider the purpose of the display. And typically, the main purpose is communication, right? It's a graphical representation. It is an easy way to convey a lot of information in a limited amount of space, and information that would might otherwise be difficult to convey adequately in text. You would have to say a whole lot textually, whereas you can just put this one figure, this one table, and it's a picture's worth 1,000 words, as they say. So that's the purpose. One thing you need to consider is it necessary to have one? You don't just want to throw a figure or table in because you think, oh, I'm supposed to have one. It's in the manual. It should serve a purpose. There should be something that you want to communicate that you're unable to communicate textually, right? So only include those things that are needed. And then that goes to the next point in terms of the relation of the graphic to your text. Any table or figure that you include must be referred to in the text. Right? And you don't just say, some sentence about your results or whatever, see table 1. No, that's lazy. Or see table 1 for results. You need to tell the reader what you want them to be looking at, right? And there may be other details in the graphic that they can pick up on and go over. And you don't have to describe every single thing that's in the table or figure. If you did that, there'd be no point in having it, right? But you need to tell them something. There's some reason that you're having them look at this. If it's that you can see that one group did more of something than another, let's say that as seen in table 1, right, as depicted in figure 2, whatever. So tell them what it is they're looking for when they're looking at that table or figure. Another general guideline: keep it simple. Don't add a lot of decorative flourishes or extraneous information. It's just what information is needed. And speaking of that, make sure you do have enough information. People should be able to look at your table or figure and understand what you're trying to communicate. They should figure out, okay, this is this table, looking at the title of the table, the title of the figure. It's mean differences between groups depending on dosage of Prozac. Okay, so this is telling me about the average difference. So they know what it's about looking at the title, and they looking at if it's a legend for a figure or whatever the labels and the headings in the table. Without going back and look at the text, they should have a general idea of what it is they're looking. So if somebody is reading an article and they want to skip the results section and just look at the tables, they should have some idea of what is being conveyed. Obviously, they'll have a better idea if they go back and read what you told them to look for, but they should be able to interpret it on its own. Okay, so have enough information. You don't want to have any kind of obscure abbreviations. If you do, you have to explain them somewhere in that table or figure. Clearly label all the elements in the graphic, and then use table notes as needed. In terms of how it's organized, you number your tables and figures with Arabic numerals, and you order them in the order that you mention them in the text. Right? And it's separate sets of numbers for tables and figures. So if it's not like table 1 and then figure 2, table 1, figure 1, table 2, figure 2, separate sets of numbers. But as you mention them in the text, that's how they get ordered, not how you think they should go at the end. It's whichever one you mention first is table 1 or figure 1. Okay, some more specific stuff on tables. The manual does a good job. There's a lot of information about this very specific stuff that would be difficult to cover here, so I'll just refer you to table 5.1 in the manual. It has a nice little graphic display of all the typical components of a table in terms of the heading and the title and all those different pieces. So check that out if you're going to have to make a table for something. And then the manual also has, in section 5.19 in chapter 5, a checklist. Okay, did you do this? Did you do this? If you had point estimates, like if you included the mean of something, did you include a confidence interval? Right. So you don't have to memorize the rules if you go through the checklist. Go, oh, did I do that? Oh, am I supposed to? Oh, yeah, I guess I am. Right? So that's a helpful thing. But then the other, I think, really helpful thing is look at other published articles, right? Because there's a bit of leeway in terms of how tables and figures are presented. They don't have to be in an exact certain way. There are some rules, but it is not one template. Otherwise, I would just tell you that template. So my recommendation is to read articles and find articles. They don't have to be necessarily even about your topic, but if your table is used to present statistical results, which frequently that's what we use tables for, find somebody else who ran similar analyses to you. Like if you're doing trying to have a table showing some stuff about a multiple regression, find an article that used multiple regression. Doesn't matter what the article's about, but if they had multiple regression and they've got a cool table, you can get ideas about how to structure a table looking at someone else's. And generally, that's interestingly not considered plagiarism to plagiarize the style of a table. Now, if you use their exact table, you probably ought to credit them, and if you copy a figure, you ought to credit them. But if you just kind of get ideas, okay, that makes sense. I'll put the p-values over here, and I'll put this over here. I like the way they organize that. You don't typically need to cite for that sort of thing. You know, it's kind of like, oh yeah, it's good to have sentences and paragraphs. Somebody else use sentences and paragraphs, you don't have to cite them for that. It's basic stuff. But look at other articles for how they organized their tables to get ideas and say, okay, what makes sense to me? What tables can I easily interpret? So I'm going to go through all the rules tables. There's kind of a couple that people sometimes trip upon. The spacing, it can be either single or double spaced. So it's kind of different for APA to be flexible there. And then the table notes, there's 3 different types of notes. General notes, which generally used are to qualify, explain, or provide information relating to the table as a whole. You know, it's maybe explanation of abbreviation used in the table. I might have a general note there. Specific note refers to a particular column, row, or cell. When you have a specific note, use lowercase superscript letters to begin the note, and then that superscript corresponds to a superscript that appears in the table, you know, on the row, column, or cell, whatever that you're referring to. And typically this is whenever there's something unique about a particular group of subjects that contributed to some score in your table, like, oh, one of these people dropped out, or this group didn't necessarily follow all the directions. Whatever. So you want to put that one note about that one score that's in the table. That would be a specific note. And then you'll almost always have probability notes, right? So using symbols, usually asterisks, just by convention, to indicate the level of statistical significance. So you know you have at the bottom, 1 asterisk means it's significant at the point 0.05 level, 2 asterisks means it's significant at the point 0.01 level, 3 asterisks means it's significant at the point 0.001 level. Which, you know, people putting all those different levels is becoming more and more rare because people are realizing that it doesn't really matter what the level of statistical significance is because it doesn't make it more significant. So more common now is just say less than 0.05 for all of them, even though if it's some other one is really less than 0.01, 0.01 is still less than 0.05, and that's not a big deal. And we're going to indicate how significant it is by including an effect size or confidence interval somewhere in our table, right? Okay, a few things about figures. A lot of the same stuff that I said about tables in terms of reviewing published articles to get a good idea of how you want your figures to look. The typical uses for figures a little different. Like I said, tables generally for presenting the results of statistical analyses. Figures sometimes, but also used for visual representation of a theory. Sometimes you'll see these different variables with arrows drawn between them. You know, suggesting that this affects this and this affects this, but it's moderated by this. You have all these bubbles and arrows everywhere. You know, a figure sometimes is helpful for that. Sometimes it is used to display data, and I think that's becoming more popular as part of a pushback to statistical significance testing. And then might also be used to illustrate some aspect of the methodology. You know, like if there's some particular stimulus, like if you showed people pictures of faces, you might have an example of one of the pictures you showed. You know, or you showed people some ambiguous picture that they then had to talk about. You know, sort of projective stimulus. You might have an example of that, so people get a better idea of what you did to these people, right? but over the types can generally be broken down into graphs, charts, maps, drawings, and photographs. With most common figures, commonly used figures are graphs, and you can have scatter plots, line graphs, bar graphs, and they all have slightly different rules. Again, rather than going into detail about all the different ones, if you're going to do one, just look at the manual about how to do it. And then again, the manual does provide another checklist for figures in section 5.30, which is good to consult. But overall, for tables and figures, I wouldn't worry as much about trying to dedicate these rules to memory as maybe some of the other grammar stuff. Like, you need to know when to use a hyphen. You need to know when to use a comma, because you do that a lot. Right? So you need to really kind of get a good feel for that. For tables and figures, this is more stuff where you should read over it, look at it. Okay, I get there's some rules here, and then when you go to sit down to make a table or a figure, pull it back out and be sure that you're doing it exactly the right way. Okay. All right, that's it for now. Take care.